Hi class. So for our next unit, we will be reading the book The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is a very popular book. There are a few movies that have been made after the book, with the recent one starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Anyways, before we begin reading the book, we need to understand the historical context of the book. By this, I mean that I'm going to give you guys a little background about what was going on around the time the book takes place. This will just be a brief overview, as you can go much more in depth yourself. Since this is not a history class, I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. So, it's important to begin with the importance of World War I. As we know, this was a big war that was going on. The U.S. entered the war in 1917, and this war was a particularly different type of war. This war had many technological advances that were used during the war. The story instead takes place after the war, though in a time that was known as the Roaring Twenties or the Jazz Age. This time period began with the end of the war and ended with the stock market crash in 1929. There was a huge change in the lifestyle of the people in the country. This was both evident socially and politically. People essentially wanted to forget about the war and look forward to the future. They wanted to have fun, lots of it. This era was seen as a free-spirited type of era. People developed this attitude that they can do anything and were constantly reassured of the American dream. The American dream now is something that we are going to need to keep in mind, as it is a huge theme throughout the book. We'll come back to this as we start reading. Now here's some things that were taking place in the 1920s. There were these new women, as they were seen, that were called flappers. They were young women with bobbed haircuts, short skirts, who drank and smoked. These women essentially differentiated from the norm and did things that their grandmothers and mothers didn't do. So back then it wasn't really common for people to have short hair like that, but these women basically defied the odds and did things differently. In 1920, women got the right to vote, so this was an important thing that went on during the 20s. With that being said, more women were in the workforce than ever before. Inventions of household cleaning tools like the vacuum and washers allowed women to not have to do as much work around the house, leaving more leisure time. So this is the washer, and this is the invention of the vacuum. The economy was booming. People were spending money at a rate like never before. The nation's wealth had in fact nearly doubled. More people owned cars. The Ford Model T came out in 1924. At the time, it cost about $260. By 1929, the ratio was one car for every 5 Americans. So this is the car, and this is the car that is going to be seen in the book, throughout the book, and if we watch the film, we'll go ahead and actually see it. Prohibition. The passage of prohibition occurred during the time in which people could not sell, produce, or distribute alcohol. This led to a lot of organized crime, things such as bootlegging, gambling, and other types of organized crime. This organized crime demonstrated throughout the book, and this organized crime is actually demonstrated throughout the book in various characters. So we'll go ahead and actually see this when we read the book. But prohibition seemed to be unequally regulated between the classes. So by that I mean that the rich were the ones who still had the alcohol, as they stacked up way before the passage of the 18th Amendment, which basically banned alcohol. And with all this fun going on at the time, like all great things come to an end. In 1929, the stock market crashed, which essentially led to the Great Depression. And that was really the end of the Roaring Twenties. It changed the way Americans viewed the American dream, um, as they started to think that the American dream wasn't attainable for everybody. And all of this that I talked about will be demonstrated and shown throughout the story. I hope you guys enjoyed this historical background and look forward to reading the book. I'm looking forward to reading this book as this is one of my favorite books. I think that it is just a great read for all students. And